Hello everybody, this is the Empirical Audiophile. And in this video, I guess you could say this is going to be a little bit of a rant, but this is something that really is uncalled for, that you're seeing on YouTube with some of these YouTubers that seem to be, well, to me, quite arrogant when they're doing some of their YouTubes. And what I'm talking about is, I'll give you an example because I've used this. My stereo system, I've had it a long time. Since 1975, I've had those LTEC speakers. And my wife has never really participated much in my hobby as being an audiophile. She's never really interfered with it. She basically can care less, really, about it. But I remember after owning it for 20 years, I finally changed over from, I had Carver equipment and changed it over. A guy came over from a salon and he brought all my Conrad Johnson equipment over and he set it up with some Kimber cable and stuff. And I remember we were listening to it to see how it sounded. He brought some other amps too, and we tried them. And they didn't sound good at all. But the Conrad Johnson did. I'm listening to it. And I remember my wife called me in another room and said, "That's the best your system has ever sounded with that equipment. Definitely, I would get that." Now, here's a person that never interfered with my hobby, but gave her 2 cents worth into what she thought about something. And I've heard other YouTubers say, well, they were trying out some cable and their wives had come up and said, "Hey, this sounds a lot different than the other cable you had," or an amplifier or preamplifier. The wife has made mention of it. But you get these arrogant, obtuse individuals who make YouTube videos, acrimonious polygasters, who like to get out there and they think women don't have ears. They think women do not have a voice in this hobby. I've never seen such arrogant people say that when you do a review or something and someone may say, "Oh, my wife came in and she really liked the way it sounded," because most women don't participate in hi-fi, but there are women that are in hi-fi. Eva Manley, for one thing, that runs Manley Labs. Skunky is another one. She listens to equipment, she builds equipment, she checks equipment, she verifies a lot of Chinese amps and stuff that are cheap, what people say and how good they sound, and she'll open them up and see things that are wrong with them, things that need to be done, and she gives her opinion on what they sound like. I even bought CDs from her opinion. Well, you know, women do have an opinion. And just like we all have an opinion, you go out to eat and you may eat something and say, "Boy, that was real good." You're not a professional cook, but you know if something tastes good, that you can give your opinion that it tastes good. You're not a professional artist, but if you look at a Rembrandt and you say, "Wow, that is a master of painting," unlike some of this modern art that just doesn't make any sense. It looks like a monkey threw, paint on a canvas. But you can have an opinion about that. Women do have an opinion. And I've seen, I'm not going to mention who it is, but I've seen more than one individual make mention about the wives making a comment, how they notice something is different or changed. And I guess this arrogant individual thinks that women don't have ears, that women should be pregnant and in the kitchen and cooking and keep their mouths shut when it comes to our audio hobby. And that's just not the case. These arrogant individuals. It really turks me off because I belong to the Chicago Audio Society, I belong to the Florida Audio Societies, and never have those audio societies ever disparaged women from not coming in and men bringing in their significant other or spouses or their wives or anything else has ever been put down. Women have always been treated with respect in this hobby. If they want to give their opinion. In fact, there's a lot of times I have went and listened to systems and I don't ask the man because men are going to be convinced right off the bat. I always, if they have a wife with them, I always will ask the wife, what do you think about this? Because women to me, they have a better sense of hearing, which they do. They say they can hear high frequencies better. And it's something to do with childbearing and hearing like a baby cry is what they'll say. Women can hear, and they can hear better than men, and they can hear high frequencies better than men can. It's just how it is. And yet this individual, which I won't mention, has insulted women. And I guess he thinks women shouldn't be involved in the hobby whatsoever or even give their opinion. How dare they give an opinion about a cable or a piece of equipment to their husbands and say, oh, that sounds better than the other one you have. A second opinion is always good, right? You don't go into a doctor and get one opinion without getting a second opinion. Or, if you go to a cardiologist and it's a man and you go to another cardiologist just to double check and it's a woman, you're not going to take her opinion because she's a woman. I mean, that's how these arrogant audiophiles are who are doing these things. That, these YouTubers, they come up and say, their wives or whatever came up and said how that sounds so good. Well, don't they have an opinion? Of course they do. This is it's a pet peeve of mine to even hear something so disgusting as putting down women like they don't know what they're talking about. And they shouldn't tell us hi-fi specialists of if something sounds good or didn't. My wife had been listening to the system for over 20 years, never said a word until the time I got that Conrad Johnson equipment. Never. Until she pulled me out to the side and said, this is the best your system has ever sounded. I definitely would buy it. Not too many people would tell you that, or too many wives would tell you that you're spending your wherewithals on something that's expensive, but you know what? It does make a big difference. Sometimes you just need that little bit of nudge or push to convince you that, maybe I'm not making it up. Maybe it does sound better than what I'm thinking. Maybe I am making a right purchase. And having somebody give you a second opinion doesn't hurt. But to insult somebody because their sexuality, because they're female, I mean, that is a big, huge insult to women. This individual should apologize to women for what he's done. Saying that, these YouTubers, they come up and their wives, their wives come up and say how good it sounds. Why? They don't have an opinion? They don't have the right to say anything? You want to hush them up? What is this guy, a Neanderthal caveman? And thinks that women have no place in this hobby? They do have a place in this hobby. But not many of them get involved in this hobby. That's okay. It's basically a man's hobby, but not many get involved in the hobby. But that's no reason to insult them at all. And I've never been to a club that ever insulted any of the wives or women that came in like they were just pieces of garbage and keep your mouth shut. This is a man's world. Never, ever seen anything as disgusting as I've seen this individual and some of the individuals that make that obtuse comment that how dare a woman open up her mouth and maybe give her opinion on something. After all, you are spending money that belongs to the household, and I'm sure she would like to have some of that money for something that she wants, fixing up the house or jewelry or something else. But she's allowing you to spend that money on something that is your hobby. And this is not a cheap hobby. So I wanted to give my 2 cents in about that. I've also seen that some people make comments about people, how they set up their stereos and they need to get their speakers away from the wall and things like this. I've seen maybe 800 or 900 different systems. A lot of them I've seen sitting in basements. I've seen people, they don't have the room. You take my system, for example, it's sitting up close to the wall. I have no choice. That's where it's got to go. I have these big, huge speakers weighing almost 250 pounds apiece. They're like small refrigerators. Where am I going to put them? I'd have to have a whole special room in a house. Homes aren't cheap. And to find a special home to put your stereo in, it isn't a luxury that a lot of us hobbyists have. I'm stuck with what I got, and this is the way it is. My speakers still soundstage and everything. Yes, they're against the wall. And no, I don't have room treatment. My wife won't approve of me. I've just spent $30,000 on crown molding and woodwork all over my house, and I'm going to come in with all kinds of room treatment, ugly looking room treatment, and put it all over the room. No, she's not going to go for that. You know, we have to respect our spouses, what they like too. So therefore, I use a room that's a family room, and my system sits against the wall. But I would say 70% of the systems I've heard all sit against the wall or in between a fireplace, very common, bookshelves, whatever, and they're not sitting away from the wall, nice 3 or 4 feet into a room. They just don't have the space. Most of us just don't. But you see some of these YouTubers, they make comments and show pictures of people that are wrong. You know, to me, that's not right either. You don't try to, I know they could be trying to help somebody, but if I don't have the room, I don't have the room. That's all there is to it. And I'm not going to give up the hobby just because I don't have enough room to pull my speakers out in the middle of the floor, and I don't have the authority to put room treatment up because I have a spouse that says, you're not putting that garbage up in the room. So it is what it is, and that's it. A lot of us, I've seen hobbyists do YouTubes and stuff. They're out of their bedroom. They're in a place where the speakers are against the wall. Okay, if you can get them away from the wall, that's fine and good if you have the space. But I see a lot of people that don't have the space, and this is the way it is. Does it mean their system now is garbage? No. Never be insulting to somebody like that. It's their way of getting into the hobby with what they have. And we always have that dream that, well, I'll move and get into a better house and I can make things better. But you know what? It doesn't work out all the time. Here I have a lot bigger house with 12-foot ceilings, big, huge room, but it's a great room. This is how my stereo has to be set up in it. I got no other choice. Okay? This is it. And you know what? It still sounds good. It still has good bass response. It still has a good separation. It still has your sound staging, your timbre, everything else. Could it sound better if I could pull it away from the wall? Yeah, probably could. But am I missing that much without doing it? No. And in what I'm missing, I really don't care. To me, it sounds fantastic just the way it is. And I've heard a lot of systems that way, that this is what it is. And you realize that. Not everybody has the room. And I'm also going to make the comment, I've heard people that have their speakers away from the wall, and they have room treatment. And I'm going to be honest, their systems didn't sound that great. So they went through all that trouble, putting double wallboard up and all this stuff. And you listen to their system, and it's like, and some of these systems are very expensive. They got a lot of money tied up into them. So that doesn't necessarily mean just because you pull everything away from the wall that you're going to come up with this fabulous, unbelievable sonic system. It doesn't necessarily mean that. And you hate to go through all that trouble just so it doesn't sonically really improve things enough to justify the cost. So, and believe me, I've heard lots and lots of systems, and therefore it's a crapshoot. And it's almost like you want to eat up your living space by pulling speakers out and everything. If you have the room, fine, but it doesn't guarantee anything. And I've heard people say, I went through all this expense and all this trouble, putting all these corner things in and all this room treatment. And they said, it sounded worse. My system sounded worse. So I don't want to spend money on something that's going to sound worse, because if I'm going to start putting holes in the wall and hanging stuff on the wall, and then my system sounds worse, and now I got to pull it off the wall and spend all that money, before I go through all that trouble, I want to make sure it's going to work, or I can take it back and get my money back. Plus, you've just destroyed your home. That's just the way it is. So if you're an audiophile out there and your system is against the wall or whatever, that's fine. People take a lot of pride in their systems, and I've heard excellent systems that were against the wall and didn't have room treatment, where I was quite impressed with the system. More so than I have seen systems where people had them away, sitting in their room, thinking they had, and I've heard muddy. The whole presentation of the system was muddy. It was distorted. It wasn't crystal clear. And they had everything right, except maybe the equipment they were using or the cable they were using or whatever made the system sound that way. But, you never insult anybody, because everybody has pride in their systems. We all start out with what we can afford. So let me know in your comments if you have a stereo just sitting against the wall, or maybe there's glass behind it. It's not perfect, but you want to be an audiophile so you accept your shortcomings. So until next time, happy listening, and this is the Empirical Audiophile. And thank you for watching.